political systems already in place. And now the military attack. To destroy the Khilafah, you'll have to destroy the Ottoman Empire. And you cannot destroy the Ottoman Empire with 5,000 Jews in an army. You need a world war to destroy the Ottoman Empire. That's a tall order. So what you do is you plan a conspiracy. And you stay behind so that your fingerprints are not on the crime. In other words, you plan a September the 11th. Huh? The attack took place in the summer of 1914 when the Grand Duke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo. In the summer of 1914 there were 6 major powers in Europe. And there was one dark horse across the Atlantic. No one knew how fast it could run because it had never run in a race so far. One dark horse across the Atlantic. And 6 major powers in Europe. They were number 1, Russia, France, Britain, Germany, Austria-Hungary, that's 5. What's number 6?
Turkey.
Ottoman Islamic Empire. Ain't no Turkey as yet. Ottoman Islamic Empire. These are the 6 major powers. How can you bring about a world war which will result in the dismantling of the Ottoman Islamic Empire? You've got to do some good planning to do this one. When they attacked and assassinated the Grand Duke Franz Ferdinand, they left footprints which led to Russia. As on September 11th, they left footprints which led to Al-Qaeda and Saudi Arabia. Huh? The reason why, I forgot to mention this last night, the reason why they put so many Saudis on board the aeroplanes. You remember I told you about the Saudi who went to his government? He says, listen, I've heard in the newspapers and on CNN that I'm dead. It seems to me as though I'm alive. What they'd done was to hijack his identity and put it on board the plane. I forgot to mention to you last night why they had put so many Saudis. The reason for this is to attack the client relationship, the friendly relations between the United States and the government of Saudi Arabia. If you can replace this with a new relationship of mistrust and hatred and enmity, it'll now facilitate the Jews when they launch their big war to take control of the Saudi oil, which is about to happen. This is why they put so many Saudis on board the aeroplanes. Good. They left footprints which led to Russia. And so Austria-Hungary had no option but to declare war on Russia. But Britain and France already had a treaty, a defense treaty with Russia. The Secretary of State, the Foreign Minister in Britain, was a Jew. And so Britain and France now had to declare war in favor of Russia against Austria-Hungary. But Germany has the same racial ties with Austria-Hungary, so Germany is now forced to enter the war on the side of Austria-Hungary. So they have succeeded. Whoever planned that assassination has succeeded in bringing all these powers now in Europe into a state of war. All that is left now is what they call the sick man of Europe. Who is that? Ottoman Islamic Empire. The Khalifa in Istanbul does not want to enter the war. He knows how weak the Ottoman army is in terms of military technology. But through internal intrigue within Istanbul, the Ottoman Empire is forced into the war, and a Russian ship in the Bosphorus is used as a pretext. Once the war started, that massive wealth which the Jews had accumulated is now going to be used strategically for the purpose of influencing the direction of the war to get the prize that the Jews want. What is that prize? To destroy the Ottoman Islamic Empire, dismantle it, and to cut off the head of Islam, namely destroy the Khilafah. That's the prize thereafter. The next prize is to liberate the Holy Land and to get the Holy Land for themselves. This is the prize thereafter. Between 1914 and 1916, German submarines now make a surprise appearance into warfare. As when Israel launches her big war, we're going to see weapons that the world has never seen before being introduced into warfare. When the German submarine entered into the war, it tipped the scales on the side of Germany, and by 1916 Britain was on the verge of defeat. German submarines had surrounded and marooned the island of Britain. The French government had fallen, and Germany had occupied France, and Britain was on her knees. This is the moment that the Jews were waiting for. Now the Czech is going to talk. It's called financial diplomacy. The Jews, this is the German Jews, went to the British government and said, let's make a deal. Let's make a deal. We will intervene in the war with massive financial assistance to you. Massive. And we will bring that dark horse into the race. But that dark horse didn't want to come into the race. American public opinion was overwhelmingly against involvement in the war. And the most famous American of all was not the president. He was a man who had established the assembly line for producing motor cars. And what was supposed to have been a luxury item for only the rich, or you could see how the rich people were grinding their teeth in anger when this man caused the motor car to become accessible to ordinary Americans. For $700 you can get a motor car. $1,000 you can get a Model T. What is his name? Henry Ford. And this man did something else to his workers. He didn't bother about what was the market wage. No. He said, I am concerned with paying a just wage. And that market wage is not a just wage. And so he paid his workers a higher wage than the market wage. And so he won the hearts of the American people. He became an American icon. His name was Henry Ford. And he was totally opposed to American involvement in the war. But when the Jews went to the British government and said, let's make a deal, the British government said, deal. And so Jewish money, the diamonds of Kimberley, began to roll. And Jewish money now enters into the war in a massive way. And Jewish influence over the media in the United States is now made to work, and American public opinion is being brainwashed and slowly transformed, until suddenly, to the consternation of Henry Ford and so many Americans, Franklin Roosevelt declares war, and the United States enters into the war. Britain, with this newfound wealth, and with the assistance of the United States, now has a new lease of life, and the war now takes on a direction that the Jews wanted from the first place. It is in 1916 that Jassasa went to work with British spies in Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia, of course, is the most well-known of them. These British spies were sent into Arabia, posing as Muslims. And they went to two actors in Arabia, two. One was Sharif al-Hussein, who was appointed by the Khalifa in Istanbul as the Sharif of the Hijaz, Mecca and Medina, in control. Mecca was under the control of an Arab battalion, but Medina was under the control of a Turkish battalion. And I wish I could understand why the Khalifa insisted on a Turkish battalion under the leadership of Fakhri Pasha to defend Medina. I don't know why. So when the British spies went to Hosein, they offered him the moon. They offered him the moon. We will liberate the land of the hated Ottoman Turks, and we will give you independence and freedom, and you will now become the king of the Arabs. Remember, Britain is not talking about Khilafah. No, we'll make you the king of the Arabs. And we also prepared to offer you a little, you know what, just £7 million. Huh? £7 million at that time is what Bill Gates has now. Sharif Hussein, the great-great-grandfather of Abdullah in Jordan now, then betrayed the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, betrayed 1400 years of history of this ummah, violated the plain and clear command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran in Suratul Ma'idah, in which He commanded us, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tattakhizul yahuda wan nasara awliya. Do not take the Jews and do not take the Christians as your awliya. Do not establish an alliance with them in which you become dependent upon them and subservient to them. Do not do that, says Allah. بَعْدُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. They are protecting friends of each other. وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّهُمْ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. Whosoever from amongst you turn to them for that kind of an alliance, you no longer belong to this ummah, you now join them. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Surely Allah will never provide guidance for a people who commit such an atrocious act of wrongdoing. And this is precisely what Sharif Hussein did, and what all his descendants from that day to this day have been doing. But the chickens are coming home to roost now for Abdullah. And the chickens are coming home to roost for Abdullah. When Mr. Bush attacks Iraq, then you're going to see Abdullah's suitcases at work. Yeah. They're all packed already, you know. They're all packed already. As soon as Mr. Bush attacks Iraq, you'll see where Abdullah is going to be heading for. Sharif Hussein now accepts 7 million sterling pounds and enters into a military alliance with Britain and declares himself independent of the Ottoman Khalifa. Once the Khilafah in Istanbul had lost control of Mecca and Medina, had lost control of the Haramain, had lost control of the Hajj, you pull the carpet, you pull the rug from underneath the feet of the Khalifa. His Khilafah is now losing legitimacy. Can anyone be Khalifa? Can you appoint a Khalifa here in downtown Lakemba? Can Mullah Umar have been recognized as the Khalifa? No, why not? Because when the Hajj comes, Amirul Mu'mineen Mullah Umar will have to apply for a Saudi visa to perform the Hajj. Huh? And if the Saudis reject the visa, the Khalifa can't perform the Hajj. All right? And so the British calculated, if we can wrest control of the Haramain and the Hajj away from the Khalifa in Istanbul, then the legitimacy of his Khilafah will begin to crumble. And so this was 1916. The British spies then went to the second actor in the Arabian Peninsula. I mean, Britain has a PhD in deception. If you want to destroy the Khilafah, okay, you have to make sure that it cannot be restored. How can you take the entire world of Islam with so many ulama and ensure that not only is the Khilafah destroyed, but it cannot be restored? That's a tall order. How to do it? The answer is, you not only have to liberate the Haramain from the control of the Khalifa in Istanbul, but you have to put it in the control of those who will not themselves claim the Khilafah and will not allow anyone else to claim the Khilafah. And so long as these people keep control of the Haramain and the Hajj, the Khilafah can never be restored. Simple, isn't it? Simple, isn't it? And so that was why they had to make the trip to Riyadh to meet, what's his name? Abdul Aziz Ibn Saud. Correct name? Of course it's a correct name. Why are you afraid to mention it? But Abdul Aziz Ibn Saud did not control the Hijaz. So he couldn't command the check for £7 million. Huh? He had to be content with something less than that. So what the British offered to him was, if you would sign the same kind of agreement with us and violate the specific command in the Quran and betray Allah and His Messenger and betray the Ummah, if you will do that, we pay you £5,000 a month. Would you accept that? Abdul Aziz says yes. Yes. And in 1916, Abdul Aziz ibn Saud signed an agreement with Britain. Yes. Which made of him a military ally of Britain, subservient to Britain. But when the Ikhwan, who were his military force, questioned him, how can you sign this agreement with Britain? And how can you accept this money from Britain, £5,000 a month? Abdul Aziz ibn Saud says, this is jizya. Jizya is what they pay to me because I control them. It was dust in their eyes and they swallowed it. And so Abdul Aziz ibn Saud got away with it. Massive betrayal, and a very dangerous plan is now in place. As soon as the Khilafah is destroyed, that Abdul Aziz ibn Saud will be given what is known as the green light, something that Saddam Hussein knows about, the green light. And then he will attack and take control of the Haramain. And when once he does that, he won't make the mistake of ever claiming the Khilafah for himself. And he will never allow anyone else to claim the Khilafah, because no one else can take the control of the Hijaz and the Haramain from them, because they are supported by Britain. And so goodbye to the Khilafah. It's gone. It can never be restored. Never, never, never be restored. So long as Britain and the United States of America underwrite the security of the Saudi state, you can never, never, never restore the Khilafah. By 1919, the Ottoman Empire was in shambles, falling apart. And a British army under General Allenby, with many Arabs and Punjabi Muslims fighting faithfully under his control, attacked the Turkish garrison which was defending Jerusalem, defeated it, and liberated the Holy Land. This was a joyous day for the Jews. because now the countdown is really moving forward and the golden age is coming back. In the same 1919, when the Ottoman Empire is collapsing and it is losing all its non-Turkish possessions, all the Arab parts of the Ottoman Empire are falling away, the Greek army now invades the Turkish mainland, Anatolia. And the Turkish people now have a tremendous fright in their hearts because the Greeks hate them with a PhD in hatred. So Britain now has to create a Turkish general who would appear to the Turkish people as a savior who has come down from the heavens with his hands resting on the wings of angels to save the Turkish people. And so at a place called Gallipoli, a man named Mustafa Kamal inflicts a defeat on the ruling state in the world, Britain, and immediately climbs the ladder to become the hero of all heroes in Turkish history. Very convenient, isn't it? Mustafa Kamal now takes over. He is in fact de facto ruler over the Ottoman Empire, and the Khalifa is just a piece of furniture. In 1920, I think, or 21, there was a big treaty, negotiations in Versailles, and from this emerged now the Turkish Republic, which replaces the Ottoman Islamic State. But Mustafa Kamal said, the Turkish people love their Khalifa. So if Europe could have a pope, why can't we have a pope too? This was simplistic thinking on the part of Mustafa Kamal. If the Europeans could have a pope, well, so too can we. So the new Turkish government of Mustafa Kamal decided to take the Khilafah and remove from it all political authority and make the Khalifa the equivalent of the Pope. This was 1922. And things were going fine for him. Turkish people were happy. Khilafah is still there. And the leadership of the revolution in Turkey were very happy because we have a secular state now, modeled after the European state. But in 1924, on the 3rd of March, suddenly Britain demanded, of course, this is secret, they wouldn't reveal it, Britain demanded of Mustafa Kamal that he must abolish the Khilafah. The demand came from Britain. And on the 3rd of March 1924, the Turkish Republic abolished the Khilafah. The question we have to ask is, why did they do it when there was no need to do it? Nothing. It represented no threat whatsoever to the secular Turkish Republic. The answer for the abolition of the Khilafah on the 3rd of March 1924 is located in a place called India. But even the Indian scholars of Islam are not aware of it. Even they are not aware of it. When the attack on the Khilafah was taking place in the 1916, 17, 18 period, then Indian ulama, at that time the Indian Muslim community was one of the most influential Muslim communities in the world. And the Indian Muslim community was led by leaders who knew Islam and lived Islam. Men like Maulana Muhammad Ali Jawhar, Maulana Shaukat Ali, Maulana Sayyid Sulaiman Nadwi, Mufti Kifayatullah, men who knew Islam and lived Islam. And they wanted to get rid of British imperial rule in India, so that when they got rid of the British, they could restore Islamic rule over Muslims. That's all they wanted. get rid of the British and restore Islamic rule over Muslims. And they realized that they could mobilize the Muslim masses of India over this issue of the Khilafah, because everybody loved the Khilafah. And so they established a movement which they call the Khilafat Movement, Harakatul Khilafah, the Khilafat Movement. When they established the Khilafat movement and it began to mobilize the Muslim masses, the body which was sleeping is now waking up for revolutionary struggle to preserve the Khilafah in Istanbul. The leader of the Hindus realized, but wait a minute, the Muslims want the same thing that we want. We also want, the Hindus, we want to get rid of the British, and we want to restore Hindu rule over the Hindus. So there's a conversion of interest here. So Gandhi, who later became known as Mahatma Gandhi, Gandhi approached the leadership of the Khilafat movement and he said to them, listen, the same thing you want, the same thing I want. So why don't we join forces? Will you allow me to join the Khilafat movement? And guess what the leadership of the Indian Muslims did? It was revolutionary theory on their part, and we praise them tonight. They admitted, they accepted the offer of Gandhi, and they formed an alliance. And so the Khilafat movement in India now became a Hindu-Muslim alliance for the purpose of getting rid of British rule. And then that would replace, that which would replace British rule would be Islamic rule over Muslims and Hindu rule over Hindus. This constituted the most dangerous of all threats that Western civilization have ever experienced in its entire period of colonization of mankind. This Khilafat movement. Because the Western objective was to demolish every existing state structure in the world and replace it with the secular state. So that eventually the secular state could be brought under the umbrella of a League of Nations and eventually a United Nations, and this would be political globalization at work. If the Khilafat movement were to succeed, then one of the most important communities in the world, the Indian Muslims, will escape. Because when the British withdrew, Muslims will be ruled by Islam and Hindus will be ruled by Hinduism. Between 1920 and 1924, the Khilafat movement was building up steam at an alarming rate. And by 1924, the British had calculated, we have to get rid of this Khilafat movement. And the only way we can think of now is to abolish the Khilafat. And so they put the pressure on Mustafa Kamal. As soon as the Khilafat was abolished, the Khilafat movement in India began to lose steam. In the same year that it was abolished in 1924, in that same year, the secularly minded British, in Indian language they call it chamcha, the stooges of the British in India, the brown-skinned Englishmen parading as Muslims, of whom the prince of them all was the grandfather of the present Aga Khan, Karim Aga Khan's grandfather. They now restore an organization called the All India Muslim League. The All India Muslim League is led by men who don't know Islam and don't live Islam. And these are the people who now wage a struggle for the liberation of the Muslims from British rule to be replaced, not with rule of Islam, oh no, but rather by the rule of the secular Republic of Pakistan and the secular Republic of India. So that